And if the blood cortisol level, which is a bound level,
Right. 97% is better.
97% bound, how would it get unbound? How would that cortisol become free for, performance as a free radical?
There's other hormones that are unbounded.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's still not an indicator in that condition,
The blood?
the
The-
blood cortisol
The
level.
blood will tell you if you have a severe pathology,
Ah,
if you're producing too many and too little in the blood,
uh-huh.
because they'll tell you your capacity to produce.
Okay.
So there's value in the blood. You just gotta know what it's good for and what it's not good for.
I see.
But you can't diagnose a functional disorder from the blood. You can diagnose a pathology.
Oh, okay.
And most of the things that we see are functional way before, it take 20, 30 years sometimes before they become a pathology.
Can you tell by lifestyle analysis?
With the levels,
Lifestyle analysis?
whether the hormone levels are?
Yeah.
Well, that's what I did for 25 years, and every time I do these tests, I learn something new and I'm completely surprised. Very rarely do they fit what I think. And I have an ability to be intuitive, and I'm wrong a lot, at least 30% of the time, but I think I'm gonna find, so thank God for this technology. It's changed the way I do things. It's made me a lot more precise, and I can see change that way.
And you
Because
send
it's-
it out?
Well, it has to be sent out. I have to it's a laboratory test. There's no way I can do that. It's multi-millions of dollars. These are big laboratories and research laboratories. It's not, I can only interpret the numbers. I can't do the test.
Can you explain what pathology means?
Pathology is when a particular organ behaves in a way it wasn't designed to,
Okay.
causing a physiological change and excess degeneration compared to rebuilding, rejuvenating. There has to be a balance. So our regulatory system, so when you take hormones or drugs or you take foods that are, you say, well, I only eat McDonald's once a month. You're trusting that your system can re-regulate itself. Because the very act of ingesting something that your immune system and your hormone system doesn't know what it is a question of Russian roulette. We used to think it was something that the body could adapt to, but we learn now that's all changed, that the body doesn't adapt because there's, Bernie and you probably, and you both, three of you probably, there is 40 to 60 genes are affected, and in every possible combination. So there's no way to predict which combination of genes will respond to a wrong nutrient to the wrong chemical. But I think that number is in the trillions, right? 40 to 60. How many combinations could that be?
It's not huge.
What's that?
They say huge.
Yeah. Because you can affect 2 genes or 1 gene, you can affect 40 genes. They have no way of knowing except there's always there's between 40 and 60 potential genetic genes and infinite combinations. So we evolved, and then we had adaptations to certain classes of evolution, and were designed for very specific nutrients. Now, gluten came about when there was a change in human beings, when human beings stopped being nomadic and staying in one place, and they started finding out that actually the way they found out was from the fecal matter. When they were eating wild wheat, and they would defecate, and their own defecation, they wouldn't digest it, would produce it to grow, and then they realized they could cultivate it that way. And then what they made was, human beings made a lot of changes in how it was grown, and so today's wheat is a hybrid, and it's man-made. And so the latest research is 33 to 40% of people are gluten sensitive. And there's no longer a difference between celiac disease and gluten sensitivity, nor is there any longer a gluten sensitivity. The way I was taught 3 years ago was people that had a mild reaction to gluten. Then you had gluten allergies, and then you had gluten intolerance, which was celiac disease. That doesn't matter. The latest research from Mayo Clinic, that 1 milligram is enough to set it off. So if you're insensitive to gluten, any exposure at all sets it off.
Sorry, I've been such a meat eater all my life.
Meat,
Yeah. What is gluten?
gluten it comes from barley, wheat, and rye, and some oats. Yeah, yeah,
But what is it?
it's a protein.
And it comes from the inner part of the grain or the
Yeah.
outer hull?
Right, the inner,
Inner.
the end of it. And so it's a certain part of the cycle.
So whether it's
that's-
milled or not, doesn't matter, the gluten's gonna be there.
No, you can actually take it from an early planting to use it for other reasons. Doesn't have the gluten in it.
Ah,
I
okay.
think I forget, it comes on about the 10th to the 17th day.
Well, regardless of whether it's whole grain or not, that's irrespective.
No, it's a protein reaction.
Okay.
It's a specific man-made protein.
Oh, man,
Yeah.
oh, it's not inherent in the
Because
grain.
of,
No, it's inherent in the
Process.
hybrid.
Man, culture.
because of breeding? you
Man
mean?
cultivated. We put, yeah, altered genetics.
So you said it's in wheat, barley, and what else?
Right.
Rye.
Okay.
And in some oats, but the reason why it's in oats and in some other grains is because of cross-contaminations.
As of 2 years ago, the explanation was that it was cross-contamination in the milling process.
Of the what?
And in the planting,
Oh,
also the planting, because a lot of the fields were next to each other. Because they found in some of the European oats, no gluten.
So it's,
There's actually a website called Gluten-Free Oats. So it'll tell you who has, which brands have found to have no gluten. So the bottom line on the research is that what we thought celiac disease was specific to the gut, and particularly the villi. So when you have a gut in your intestines, you have little hair-like protrusions. And the way I was taught when I studied physiology was the villi take in the nutrients. And there's very tight junctions between the villi. And that is 70% of your, conservatively speaking, some researchers say that's 90% of your immune system is that area of the gut. So you have junctions, and there's 2 layers to keep out foreign invasions.
Small intestine.
Yeah, small intestine. So if you have viruses or bacteria get through your stomach because your stomach is not acidic enough, if your stomach is 3 and above pH, you can get parasites, viruses, bacteria into the gut. So you have a very specific system to keep them from getting into the blood. So these are the quote tight junctions.
What is a junction exactly?
This space with each villi, which are like hair-like protrusions that are tightly together. The way it used to be taught is think of a shaggy rug that something gets worn and it starts getting loose like these things. So each one would be a villi. Now the way it was taught forever in physiology, and it's in the older texts, is that the villi take in the nutrients. Current research is that we find that each villi is specific to its particular nutrient. So if you don't have that genetic history, you don't have a villi for that nutrient. So if you don't have a villi for the gluten, it responds by producing a rapid inflammatory response. If you have an inflamed gut, and then the inflammation pushes the villi open, and you have it walking an open door for everything to get into the blood. So So this is why we're calling this the explanation for the unexplained. Why we're coming, there's so many diseases that nobody knows what they're coming from, and they're increasing rapidly, quicker than I can count. And people are chasing, you know, there's specialists for this disease and specialists for that disease, and nobody's figured out there's an underlying breakdown in the whole system. So what happens with the villi, so if your villi are affected, they actually die. They become short, and then you have a breeding ground for pathogenic bacteria. And if that system breaks down, that gets into the blood, and then that circulates. Now, from the blood, usually if that villi are breaking down, that defense, your blood-brain barrier starts to break down, and they can actually get into the brain, and you can start getting neurodegenerative disease. You follow me?
So what do you call that pathogen? Is it,
Any pathogen.
What is the brain-blood barrier, by the way?
The brain-blood barrier is a system designed to keep pathogens and proteins that out of your brain that would damage your brain. To keep out heavy metals, it keeps out all the things. Our immune system is the gut, not the blood. That's one of the arguments against vaccination, is that you're putting foreign proteins into the blood where we have no immune system. Our immune system is the gut. So what happens with the gluten sensitivity, so let me go over that again. Right now, there's only one place. You either have it or you don't have it. That's what the current science is. So if you have it, it doesn't matter what level you have it, it's the same condition. Whether you're going to get deathly ill or come down with a disease is based on how many factors. Some people will be less ill, some people walk around with gluten sensitivity because the rest of the body is intact, with just not feeling that they can live their own capacity, or they become allergic to things, because if you have gluten, you tend to get allergic to other proteins. So the current research, which is a change, that any exposure, if you're gluten sensitive, that exposure has to be avoided 100%.
How did they figure this out?
There's a lot of scientific papers, there's piles and piles, and there's thousands. And putting it together into one system, there's a guy named O'Brien, that's who I took the research with him. And he just reads thousands of papers and then he puts it together.
Do you have any information on the percentage of the population that is significantly gluten sensitive?
There's no more significant, you either are or you're not, that changed. It used to be significant. So 33 to 40%.
Oh, that's what I was asking. About a third or more.
And then they're now saying 40%.
So Bernie has this point of view that he doesn't think that things are either white or black, is what he's told me. He thinks that, a little bit can be tolerated. He doesn't totally believe that it has to be 100%.
Right, and Bernie sounds like me 3 years ago. Or up until 3 months ago, actually.
So comment on it, Bernie.
Well, comment is that every process pretty much has some ramp up, ramp down. It's really hardly anything in nature, which is simply binary.
Yeah, but that's the way it's taught. But what we see is a complete breakdown, and that if you can't, I'm explaining to you what happens, and what the best science and the best clinicians say you're wrong, and that it takes the current science to repair it. Is first of all, if we used to, and I'm guilty of this, so I'm not. I learned as I go along. And I used to tell people that you just stop eating gluten, and your body will repair. And that if you have a little bit, you can handle it if your antibody levels are not too high.
That's what he thinks.
Yeah, that's what they used to think. Everybody thought that. He was current. That's the way it was. Now it's got much more sophisticated. That the way you would understand it, that if you go 100% free of gluten. All you're doing is stop putting oil on a fire.
The
Until
fire's
it's
still-
repaired. The
fire's
fire is
still
still
burning.
going on, and the fire lasts between a year or 2 years if you do everything right.
And that, you're talking about the metaphor of fire dying down, is your body gradually repairing the villi damage done by the gluten exposure.
Okay, statistical, and you guys know more statistics than I do, but the statistical analysis.
No, that's okay, and I
The
accept the
statistical
face
analysis
value.
is that the death rate stays at 2.5 times the general population, even after stop eating gluten for at least a year to 2 years. So even if it has no significant impact on the death rate until there's actual repair.
Yeah, yeah. So
And
I'm,
to even make it more complicated, that people that haven't been diagnosed with gluten sensitivity, that are just related to somebody with gluten sensitivity, they found their death rate is 2.5 times higher than the general population.